Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we're kind of diving into a topic that we don't normally talk about, which is how to deal with wealth that you may not have created. And our conversation today is about inheritance, divorce, and sudden wealth, and really looking at controlling what you've acquired in some capacity. And so today I'm joined with somebody who is coined the phrase the inheritors advocate, Myra Salzer, and she's the founder of the Wealth Conservancy in Boulder, Colorado. Myra isn't just a financial expert, she's actually a guide for those who suddenly find themselves with wealth that they may not have created. Whether it came through inheritance, divorce, or widowedness, this kind of wealth brings unique challenges. So we're going to talk a little bit about this topic and how we relate to money, how we deal with money, the emotionalness of it. Obviously, I'm in divorce, so I see a lot of wealth being transferred, but her goal is to kind of build confidence and clarity in this space and to maybe educate us on what we should be doing a little bit better. So welcome, Myra. How are you today?
I'm terrific. How about yourself?
I'm struggling, but I will make it through.
Yes, you will. You can do this.
So this is an interesting topic. You really kind of created that we would talk about this, and it related to what I deal with a lot, which is trying to understand the emotionalness, in a divorce when you're going to come into maybe substantial wealth. And in some of these situations, they were not in control of the wealth, or they didn't even understand that sometimes it existed. And so I think if we just start off at a simple basis of what do you define as wealth? What do you see when we're looking at people that are in these states of transition and that are having this beautiful abundance coming into them, but it's creating anxiety that they are not as comfortable with talking about to their financial advisors and their other, people involved in their life? Like, how do you kind of start us off in this conversation?
I think starting off by putting wealth into perspective. And the word wealth actually comes from the Middle Ages, and it's a combination of two words. It's well and health. So it's way beyond finances. It's spiritual wealth and community wealth and health wealth and intellectual wealth and spiritual wealth and of course financial. So when we talk about wealth, we're not only talking about money. We're talking about the holistic, more thorough definition. And we really focus on self-wealth and health wealth and community wealth and spiritual wealth, as well as the financial wealth, of course.
Well, and I like that you're looking at it holistically, because I think that for the most part, when I'm seeing this transfer, it is typically in an estate. And so you'll either have like family members transferring assets or inheritance in some capacity, because we do a lot of business valuations. And you'd also see it in divorce. And then you kind of also said that, when somebody becomes a widow as well. But what we're delineating in this conversation is sort of like, you may have somebody that has worked their whole lives to create some sort of abundance. Or they are then acquiring it in some capacity. And there's a different level of kind of maybe relating to money or looking at those set of assets if you were the wealth creator as opposed to the wealth recipient. And so I think that that's really what we're trying to distinguish, is those two categories. But how, like big picture, how do they relate different? Like, what are some of the big issues of the difference of how they look at abundance or wealth?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like that. wealth creators have this cause and effect relationship with their wealth. They did something, they were financially rewarded. They did something, they were financially rewarded. And so they have this future-based orientation, like, okay, in the future, if I do this, I'll get that. So they're future-based. And they have this sense of abundance, like, oh, all I have to do is work for it or do it, and it will come. And they have a fear of missing out, FOMO. So they want to get involved in everything. They are socially respected. I mean, workaholics it's the one addiction that is respected. And and they have this confidence. They grew into it, and their confidence and self-worth grew alongside it. Whereas an inheritor or a divorcee or a widow, they don't have this cause and effect relationship with the wealth. And they don't have this orientation towards the future, but it's more legacy based. It's been given to you for a reason, or for whatever reason. It's legacy based, and this could very well be it for that person. So there's this scarcity, and how much can they spend every month without running out of money in their lifetime, or without their kids running out of money in their lifetime, whatever it is they want. And so there's this fear of loss, and they're treated, instead of the respectability that wealth creators get, they're often met with hostile envy. And that makes a person want to hide, pretend they don't have the money, try and fit in. And so they're ashamed and embarrassed about having money, especially, because they didn't earn it, or it's not respected. Anyway, so there's shame and embarrassment that goes along with having assets, financial resources that they didn't earn themselves.
Oh, I mean, I think that, I kind of understand it because, and I almost think that you could separate it even to entrepreneurs and then, normal 9 to 5 people who are working or something like that. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm constantly like, okay, just create more, like, oh, you need that thing. Okay, well, just create more. And a lot of times the limiting belief of other people is like, no, we have a budget and this is what it, like, I only make this much. And so I have to live within. And those are a lot of limiting beliefs. So I almost think that somebody who acquires it in some capacity, they're like, how do I keep it? Whereas somebody who's in constant kind of creation and entrepreneurship, they're like, just create more. Like, just keep on creating, right?
John Lennon had this great line. He said, need to write another song. I need to write me a swimming pool.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's an abundance mindset that kind of exists and is created over time. But the reality is that, inheritors, divorcees, and widows relate to money different, especially in a lot of these situations that we're seeing. They're not even understanding the level of wealth until it almost shows up at the doorstep, right? Like, they were living in a budget. They were kind of living within some sort of means because the other person that controlled the money was creating that environment, right? And so when they came into it, it sort of does seem like it fell upon their lap, even if it had existed in the past, right? So how else are they relating to this differently in your mind?
So are you asking, how do inheritors, widows, and divorcees relate differently? Yeah. So the divorcee and the widow both will get support. People can relate to them. A lot of people have been through divorce. A lot of people have had a spouse die, And there are support groups, and so there's sympathy that's out there for them. They aren't afraid to ask for help, and there's a community there. Whereas oftentimes an inheritor, as I said, doesn't get any respect, and there is no support. I've had a client whose therapist said, "Gee, I wish I had your problems," and that's what they deal with. They are not given permission to have an ignorant stage of their relationship with their money. And so they're afraid to ask stupid questions. They're afraid to really learn about it. And a lot of people will be told, "Oh, get an MBA, you'll get it all." No, it's not the same. It's not the same. You have to start with, what do you have? Where do you want to go, and how to get there? And it's that simple. But just even defining what they have, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of spending for a lifetime? What does that mean in terms of how do you go out to dinner with friends, and do you have to pay? Do you not have to pay? What are the rules here? It didn't come with a manual.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, do you think that people are more hiding in some capacity and maybe not doing as much, because there's probably stages in how somebody acquires this wealth, right? So they receive funds, and in some concept, I think the only thing that people understand is like winning the lottery, right? Like all of a sudden you're now go from here to there. The only difference is that people may or may not know, like they may have known somebody passed away or you got divorced or something happened, but they may not know the depth of that money. So what happens when somebody sort of receives this, and in all aspects, you want to keep it to yourself? Like, are you even talking to friends about it? Are you even having conversations? Sometimes inheritances start to break apart families as well. What are you seeing as like stages that somebody should expect in this process?
Yeah. I think we all of us, everyone, whether there's financial resources or not, we all start in an innocent stage where everything we want, we get. Milk from mom. And, get to sleep when you get to sleep, or whatever it is. But most of us go out of that innocent stage and into a denial stage at age 18 months, 2 years, when you have to have your brother's hand-me-down tricycle because there isn't enough. So the next stage is denial, pretending that you want it, your things are still innocent, you can still go back. And then the next stage is the ignorant acceptance stage, accepting that there are limits, that there is money, that there is a trust fund, that there is a stockholders meeting. You don't know what it is yet, or how to relate to it, or how to be in it, but you're accepting it. And that's the stage at which we can start to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that stage, as soon as you start working on it, you go into the learning growing stage. And that learning growing stage can be kind of onerous. It's very time consuming usually, and it requires a commitment, just like learning any new skill, whether it's tap dancing or archery or anything. It takes practice, it takes time. But once that time is put in, you can become fluid in it, and you become an integrated authority. And as an integrated authority, you're in a position to be able to delegate the responsibilities of financial resources that you don't want to take on yourself. And you can do that from a position of authority.
Well, a lot of what I think our viewers or our audience may see is a lot in the estate planning space. And so like we recently had a young woman who her father passed unexpectedly, and she was the executor of the estate. And, there were partners, there were business valuations that needed to be done. And she literally was just like a fish out of water. She's like, you know,
Yeah.
and because there is a dynamic with like the first and second generation to sometimes really not be clear about the financial picture with the family, it's like they hold it all back. And so when this happened, I mean, it was so messy, and there was like insurance that she had to deal with. There were partners buying out. There was like a business that was almost kind of failing, and it wasn't anybody else in the family, but that one person. And it's almost like they get a target on their back because they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to be the executor of the estate, but what do you see when that kind of happens? Like unpack some of that dynamic, because that's what we have in second and third generation companies and families. They're just oblivious to it, right?
Yeah. So each generation has its own market circumstances that makes it different. But when the second generation or a grandchild that is responsible for settling an estate, as you mentioned, their job, I mean, it sucks. Firstly, because rarely, and I've never seen it, where the wealth creator, the skill set that's required to be a wealth creator is a completely different skill set than retaining or preserving wealth. And that person's skill set is not in teaching, it's in accumulating, it's in growing. So usually the wealth creator is a terrible teacher. And that's why that wealth creator, or that in your example, the executor wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
Because the wealth creator had no idea what he was laying on. And I'm going to assume it was a he, but it might have been a she. And so this executor, and in some states it's called a personal representative. So just so you know,
Yeah.
This executor had a huge responsibility without any training, without any manual, without any preparation. It was really unfortunate. And they have to navigate a lot of details that are, I mean, it can be overwhelming. You're absolutely right. It's appraisals. It's putting together any kind of loans that were out there. It's notifying. It's getting the documents. It's were there trusts and who are the beneficiaries and who are the trustees, and it's a lot. I feel, and they need help.
Well, and in some cases, because we see this a lot, and again, this is traditional long-term businesses that have been held in families, that we will see a lot of the income is also kept in the business, right? Whether it's a C corp or something like that, and there's reasons for it. So it's almost like the family is a little bit oblivious to the extent of the wealth. And when somebody passes and that executor or that personal representative or the fiduciary responsibility, like whoever it is, comes into play, they're the first ones to know that the wealth exists. And I don't always think that they know how to then translate that to the family, because they already know that from what they've seen in the movies, that everybody's going to start fighting, right? And so it's like they have this knowledge and they almost don't know what to do with it. Is that when you're seeing that they should be seeking out maybe somebody who is going to help them be like a financial coach as opposed to just an investor?
Yeah. So yeah, the difference between wealth coaching financial coaching, life coaching, and investment management and financial planning are worlds apart. And it's really something you need to combine in that position, or when you receive money that you don't know how to relate to it yet, regardless of how it came. And knowing that you are responsible for settling an estate, you are responsible for staying afloat during your lifetime, you are it's just, you deserve coaching, and from someone who is, number one, a fiduciary. I'm amazed at how many people will go to publicly traded companies, whether it's Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or Wells Fargo. They're not fiduciaries. A fiduciary has to put the client's interest first, whereas a publicly traded company like JP Morgan has to put the shareholders first. Their goal is to charge as much as possible and deliver as little as possible to increase the profits. That's their mission. So, number one, fiduciary. Number two, don't go to someone who's an asset gatherer. In other words, a firm that gets paid because they bring in assets to manage. Because maybe you don't want to sell that house right away. And maybe you do want to wait and see. There are so many things that might not be liquid, that an asset gathering firm that gets paid for investments as a percentage of investments would have this conflict of interest. You also, perhaps, although it's better to work with someone where there's a hourly rate charge. And the advantage of that is there's no question who they're working for and why. But what happens so often when someone charges an hourly rate is that the client tries to minimize the time used and doesn't really take the time, or let the professional take the time to get to the bottom of something and really understand it. And you want to have someone who's experienced. You don't learn this stuff in a day or a week or a year. It could take well over a decade. And someone who has a team approach, because it's no one person can do this. And so we believe that hiring a firm on a retainer basis is the best way to go about getting control over your assets. And that way you're not afraid to utilize them more. There's no incentive for them to bring assets under management, but of course they do manage assets if that's what's important. So those are the questions to ask a potential financial advisor before you sign on.
Well, and I think financial advisors are used to people coming to them with wealth and that they have a grasp on it. And I think my experience in the divorce world and the estate planning world is that, this nuance that really you kind of sort of caught my ear about is really fascinating, because I think we are just treating everybody as if well, you came into wealth, lucky you, put it, invest it and live life and prosper. But we're missing some of the emotional, the mental kind of machinations, and then the family dynamic, because I do a lot of litigation, and really wealthy people could solve a lot of the litigations, but they don't, because they have these everybody has a view of money. Whether we've talked to other people about how trauma in your family creates that you have different perspectives of money. But, do you see that this is a year-long process, right? Do you see that this is a working with somebody, because you might not feel like you can trust everybody else with this very sensitive information. So it almost feels like you would need to work with somebody to kind of become better, depending upon all the levels of nuances of that wealth, whether it's a business, whether it's just market, some market securities or something like that. It really could require, and I don't think anybody has ever, I've never heard somebody talk about like financial coaching when you come into wealth. I think I have the perspective like, that's a great problem. Anybody could help you. But how is that incorrect?
You would expect this with widows and also with divorcees, but perhaps not with inheritors, even though it's very real. And that is a mourning process. When they first receive this responsibility, somebody died, a marriage died, whatever. But with an inheritor, they too have a mourning process because they got some financial resources, but they got new responsibilities. They have new relationships with it. There's a relationship dynamic that shifts when you have the financial resources, and they can never go back to the life they had before they inherited. Mm-hmm. And if they don't go through a mourning process, the mourning of the life they lost, the life as they had known it, if they don't go through that process, then they're not going to become integrated authorities with their assets. So understanding the emotional side, and that's what the wealth coaching does, and understanding what your relationship is with money. So what are their archetypes, their money archetypes? That is a really valuable thing to learn. And it goes hand in hand with the mechanics of wealth, the estate settlement, the documents, the investments, the insurance, the getting everything covered so that they're in maximum control over their wealth. And you asked, is this a one-year process? Who knows? Usually it starts with the education in the first year and understanding, and then the client figuring out what it is they want to do or like to do. They might want to start their own business. They might want to start their own philanthropic organization. They might find they love investment management. So once they find that out, and that could take a year or more, then they can do that and delegate the areas that they don't love. And we've had clients for over 30 years because they delegate to us what they don't love to do.
Well, because I think normally they would go talk to their therapist or talk to a financial advisor, maybe even the family's financial advisor, which could be as old as the person who, they inherited it from. But when we started talking about this initially, you also talked about assessments and, looking at money archetypes and how this helps people. Because again, every time that I've had somebody come into this, and I deal with a lot of young people that, like right now, we even are trying to help a young person negotiate buying out other family members. The amount of trauma that this kid is going through to like figure out the best way, and getting advice from, aunts and then uncles and then cousins and all of this. When we break it down in a more granular fashion for our viewers, because we're all very, money oriented or financial, what are we talking about with archetypes? Like, what does this mean? Like, how am I breaking this down?
So Melissa Hoyer at the firm has a session program where she will, and you don't have to be a client of the firm to go through that program. It's called Way into Wealth. And you, in that 8-session program can learn what your archetypes are, what your relationship with money is. You really can be grounded in who you are with your wealth. Now, if we have a client of the Wealth Conservancy, then they also take assessments so we know how they solve problems and what their personalities are. And we give them 2 assessments, and every one of our colleagues at the firm have taken that assessment also. So we can team up the complementary assessments or strengths with the clients and make sure that we have a team that can relate to each other and work together.
Well, and I know that when we were talking, we don't like to talk about the psychology of money because we're not psychologists. Now,
Right.
my father is, so I've been in therapy for a long, long time against my will. But, realistically, in going through a healing journey, which I think a lot of people kind of, when you have these sort of catastrophic things that happen in your life and you have to do things different, you start to realize maybe how toxic your relationship with money was or is, right?
Exactly.
Like whether you have limiting beliefs or abundance mindset,
Yeah.
where does mindset fit into, like, after you do the assessment and you're like, oh, wow, I have a better understanding. Is that when then you would kind of be working with somebody like you that is more of like a financial coach? Or am I really, like, what's the difference? Financial coach, investor, is everybody who invests money also a financial coach, or are there differences here?
I think there are big differences, and a lot of them are just personality differences. And there will be some people who are very oriented to the numbers and others who are much more oriented to empathizing, communicating, and so having that mix for a client. And after the client has had their assessment, so we know how they'll receive the information. If someone is a very physical person, we've had 3 Olympiads as clients, and very physical. They need to move. That's how they operate, and the assessments bore that out. I mean, it was really clear. And so when we had meetings with them, we had to go for a walk. They could not hear what we had to say by sitting at a conference room table and having us present. So that's one example of how understanding how someone operates is really important, to know how to present material and how to work with them. If someone is if we do the Colby assessments definitely for everybody, and if someone's a high follow through, they're systems oriented, they want to-do lists, they want agendas in advance, they want to have summaries after a meeting. If someone's a quick start, they want to bounce around ideas and, oh, we could do this, and maybe what about that? And so if we don't have another quick start on the team who can receive that and turn that around and build on that, then we haven't matched up, we haven't created an appropriate team.
So it is it is a lot of also personality match or connection, because a lot of times the only advice that I can give somebody is like, find a consultant or an advisor that you like, that you enjoy being around, because they could become a little bit of your best friend in this as a long-term relationship. Can you give me just one example of like the most prevalent money archetype that maybe you see? Or like, I guess I just don't understand this really is, being in finance for 20 plus years, you would think I would know some of this stuff, but it really is an interesting perspective that I just guess I haven't considered.
Yeah. So the money archetype is not my area of specialty. It
Yeah.
is for the Way into Wealth program. And it does indicate whether someone's a maverick or a saver, or they'll find out what their
Gotcha.
relationship is with money. And knowing that will help us in the financial planning area and the investment management area, help us make recommendations that fit their archetype.
Okay.
If a 5% loss would be devastating to a client, we would put together a very different portfolio, or educate them, or suggest that they go and find someone with whom they do fit better. Whereas if someone says, "Oh, just go for broke, I don't care, you could lose it all," and then that's probably not a fit either, because we work with people who can't make the money again. And so wealth preservation, and when we say wealth, you heard what the definition is. It's a broad concept of wealth preservation in its entirety, and that's what we do.
So if somebody wanted, like if this was interesting to somebody, they could go on and they could do this assessment with you or with your company and do this 8-week program. Now they're in a situation, or even right now, they're like, okay, I'm questioning things. If they're looking for, and I'm loosely saying financial advisor now, because I really think it's almost like a holistic place to manage this wealth and abundance, what at a minimum should they be asking the people? Like if they're actively interviewing people or looking at options, like where do you think our mindset should be about understanding ourselves in this relationship? Like what should they ask somebody to really identify that they're finding the right fit?
Yeah. I like that you framed the Way into Wealth program as a way to understand enough about your own circumstances and your relationship with your wealth to go out then and find the right person, or find the right firm, or find the right team. And so, yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's, what do I want to say? I like also how you framed that: find someone you like, find someone you're comfortable with, someone you want to go out to lunch with, someone you can laugh with, because you are going to spend a lot of time together, and you do want to be in a relationship where you're growing, learning, and integrating with your wealth, so that when you've arrived, when your net worth and your self-worth are aligned.
Ooh, okay. I like that. I like that a lot. I also think that asking them questions, especially if you have inherited, if you from a widow perspective or a divorcee, I feel like at this point, I now think you have to ask questions to that advisor if they understand that. Because again, as a person in finance for 20 plus years, I don't think any advisor could advise me, right? But if I came into this sort of abundance, or if I've had, kind of limiting beliefs that I have earned throughout my lifetime, then I think that I would want to know, do you understand these issues at this point? Because it's almost like anybody could invest your money for you in some capacity. But if you're not financially savvy, then you really need somebody that understands all of the emotions that you're going through, as opposed to just like, oh, okay, here's this fund. Okay, here's your
Right.
percentage, because a lot of times I have people that come in and they're like, yeah, but I need to invest it, but like I don't even know how to get onto auto pay in the bills. Like I don't even know where the bills are, because I wasn't involved in that process for the majority of my life. And again, people would probably say, "Oh, lucky you." But yes, but how do you find that support?
Yeah.
Because it's so complex.
Right. And forensics, accounting, forensic, financial planning, that's what's required. And someone might not even know the right questions to ask. And that's what wealth coaching will help them with. Here's what you need to find out. It can be really, really basic.
I mean, do you think that financial coaching is really more about helping you with mindset and kind of getting that to, the self-love space so that, like, are you gearing towards getting them autonomous? Are you really just getting them so that they can mentally handle all of the areas and maybe, you know, give that power to other people, like find the right team that supports that position?
It so depends. I mean, yes, we have some wounded chickens that come and start with us. And then we have some people who are really grounded, really understand, and really good at delegating. And I don't think there's any rule of thumb there.
Sure. Well, then let's kind of talk about what inspired you to kind of get into this space. Were you just a traditional advisor and then started to see some of these issues? But how did you become the inheritors advocate? Because I love that term.
Um, I was a starving financial advisor.
Okay.
And really wasn't sure I'd be able to make it. And there was a couple who made an appointment to come into the office. And I thought, yes. And I wore my blue suit and I rented the conference room. And I was so ready for our 10 o'clock appointment. And 10:15 rolled around and they didn't show up. And 10:30 rolled around and they didn't show up. And I was just about to give up on them when they came in almost 45 minutes late. And I thought, okay, let's see what it is. Maybe this is great. And they sat down, a husband, wife, and he wasn't making eye contact. He was kind of looking around. And I said, how can I help you? And he said, the only known source of income I've ever had is just dissipated, and I don't know what to do. And I thought, shoot, this is not what I was hoping for. And then I noticed that she was playing with her ring and that the stone was on the palm side of her hand. And this was a rock. I mean, I don't know much about jewelry, but this was a rock. And I didn't want to talk about him not having any income anymore. So I asked about the ring, and she turned it around and she said, yeah, yep. And I said, where did you get that? And she said, Hurdle's Jewelry, which was right around the corner from my office. And I said, when did you get that? And she said, well, that's why we were late. And I said, you probably spent tens of thousands on this. Yeah, $60,000. And I said, but you have no income. What am I not getting here?
Right.
What am I missing? And he's like, oh, I know. I've lived off my trust income all my life. And I turned 35 last week and my trust terminated. And now I have $18 million I don't know what to do with. And then she bursts into tears. She goes, how can I go home and show my father this ring? He can't even make his mortgage payment. And I thought, wow, this is not something they taught us in the College for Financial Planning. And the very next day, another inheritor came in with a different set of circumstances. And I thought, if I could just get these two inheritors together, they could support themselves and I could just go ahead about being a financial advisor. And so I put together a workshop for inheritors to come. They had to have inherited enough that paid work didn't make a difference in their life.
Okay.
And they may not have earned the source of their wealth themselves. And that's what started the whole specialty of working with people who haven't earned it themselves, who haven't made it through their own effort.
Well, and that's a case of where that could have really derailed them, like, and do you see any situations where they come into that substantial wealth and it just derails them? Or how can you avoid that?
Well, there in cases like that, where this trust had been set up, 75 years earlier, there's nothing I could have done to have derailed it, but there's a lot we can do to mitigate the shock. It's like a tsunami or a meteor hitting you, and just understanding what's going on for you in this circumstances and what your options are and what your boundaries are can calm the situation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that, again, I think our viewers could be like, oh, great problem to have that you have 18 million, but we're just shedding light on the fact that this is maybe not talked about, or even your current clients may not be talking about some of this, anxiety that they have because it is so judged as like, oh, poor you, anxiety, but it is very relevant to them. And again, you can't just go tell your best friend, like, life does have to change, because if you tell your friends or your colleagues, they're going to be like, oh, well, now you should pay for everything. Like, you should give me something. Like,
I don't need to give you a raise or, get,
yeah, I mean, it's just a
exactly.
whole different ball game. Okay, so I think we've talked so much about this. Can you tell us a little bit about your company, yourself, how you kind of, if somebody's watched this and they're like, okay, she gets it.
Mhm.
I haven't been able to talk about this to other people because, like, even if they say that it doesn't matter, you can tell by the look in their eyes. Like, I watch it in judges' faces and lawyers' faces in the divorce world, and how they kind of, tap the woman on the shoulder or the head, and they're like, oh, poor you, honey. You're going to have such a hard life going forward. Somebody like that is not getting, it's not like they want sympathy. They're not getting the support that they need to make those decisions. So if somebody is kind of resonates with some of this information, what would it look like for them to reach out to you? Like, how do they do that? What does that look like? Kind of, what is your process?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
I think the first thing to do would be to go to the website, which is thewealthconservancy.com, and see what we're doing and sign up for a consultation request. I'll talk to anybody. And if it's something we can help with, great. If it's not, we'll point you in the right direction. Don't let it fester. Don't let this grow. Don't let it stop you from living. Don't let it isolate you.
mhm.
And this is freedom is what it's all about. And this is a freeing experience. You have so many options when you have inherited wealth, when you have an abundance of financial resources. And while you have new problems that you aren't familiar with or haven't, aren't aware, how to deal with it, you also have the financial resources to make other problems go away. And how to balance those is what we'll help with. But yeah, call, And, just talk to me if you think that our 8-session program for Way into Wealth would be helpful. You can do that without any long-term obligations. If you just have quick questions like, so-and-so advised such and such, what do you think? Happy to talk.
That's awesome. Well, I think, thank you so much for sharing some of your insight, for reminding us that, not all wealth is earned the same way, but all wealth needs some care, some stewardship, some clarity, some support. And, for our listeners, whether you're an advisor or a valuation expert or somebody just kind of going through a windfall through inheritance, divorce, or loss, this is a reminder that the financial strategy isn't just numbers. This is like deeply personal. It takes maybe some inter work, that you might want to delve into. But if you found this helpful, you can subscribe, you can leave us a review, you can share it with somebody who is kind of quietly carrying this weight of sudden wealth. And remember that this starts with understanding your story, maybe your archetype, your history, and your capabilities. So we really appreciate you. And we're probably going to have you back on because this was just kind of a primer of this area. I think that we need to talk a little bit more about, some of the nuances or how we could be better prepared. Because I believe that going forward, we're going to probably in the next 2 years create the most millionaires that we've ever created, either based through legacy shifting, from business owners and baby boomers, or the internet is going to create a ton of people that don't look at the 9 to 5 the same way. They have this sort of new freedom that maybe their parents and grandparents never had. So I appreciate you, Myra. And if you want to
This
reach
was
out,
great fun.
this is really great. And I appreciate your patience through this. We had some struggles with the technology, but I think we pulled it off. So
Yes, we
I
did.
will look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks so much.